The morning sun rises over the frontier between Spain and Portugal, spreading a pale golden light across the dusty plains. But where it touches the little village of Fuentes De Oñoro, that light turns to smoke. The sound of musket fire splits the stillness. Men shout, muskets crack, horses scream. Within moments, the narrow streets are filled with chaos. British redcoats crouch behind stone walls, Portuguese allies fire from the shadows of doorways, and French infantry push forward through clouds of powder and flame. A British sergeant calls out above the noise, "Hold the line, lads. Don't give 'em the street." A French officer shouts his men on, "En avant! Take the church." The air smells of saltpeter, burnt straw and blood. The cobbles beneath their boots are slick. The cries of the wounded echo through the alleys as smoke swirls between the houses. It is May 1811, and on this small patch of ground, the fate of Portugal and the reputation of two great commanders is about to be decided. The Battle of Fuentes de Oñoro, a fight that would come to define Wellington's defensive genius and mark the beginning of the end for Napoleon's grip on the Iberian Peninsula. Transition. But before the gunfire, before the burning streets, there was a long and bitter road that brought both armies to this lonely frontier. For years, Spain and Portugal had suffered beneath the shadow of Napoleon's empire. His marshals swept through their kingdoms, installing puppet kings and crushing resistance. But the peninsula refused to yield. Guerrilla fighters, peasants, priests, even farmers, harassed the French from every hill. They cut supply lines, ambushed convoys, and made every mile of road a threat. In 1810, Napoleon sent one of his finest, Marshal André Masséna, to finish the job once and for all. He invaded Portugal at the head of 60,000 men, determined to drive the British out and bring the war to an end. At first, the invasion rolled forward like a tide. But standing in his way was a man of cold calculation and iron discipline, Arthur Wellesley, soon to be known as the Duke of Wellington. At Busaco, Wellington met Masséna's army head-on and stopped it in its tracks. Then, withdrawing toward Lisbon, he revealed his masterstroke, the lines of Torres Vedras, an immense system of fortifications dug into the hills north of the city. For months, the French battered against those defenses, but the walls held. Behind them, Wellington's troops were fed, rested, and supplied by the sea. Outside, the French starved. By spring 1811, Masséna's army, once confident and proud, was half ruined. Men marched barefoot, eating horses and roots. When he finally ordered the retreat, it became a long, bitter crawl through a wasted land. Yet even in defeat, one glimmer of hope remained, the fortress of Almeida, still in French hands deep inside Portugal. If Masséna could relieve it, perhaps he could restore his reputation, perhaps even redeem his command. Transition. And so, though exhausted and hungry, the French turned once more toward the frontier. Behind them came Wellington, patient, relentless, ready to end the campaign. Two commanders, mirror opposites in every way. Wellington was calm, methodical, and precise. His staff called him cold. His enemies called him cautious, but in that caution lay strength. He never fought unless the ground and timing favored him. Masséna, by contrast, was fire and pride. Napoleon once called him the darling child of victory. But now, after his failures in Portugal, that title mocked him. He burned to reclaim it. Wellington's army, about 34,000 British and Portuguese troops, was well supplied and disciplined. Masséna could muster 40,000 men, though many were weary and underfed. Still, he believed he could win, one decisive battle to erase months of humiliation. He would strike Wellington before the British could regroup, free Almeida, and open the road back into Portugal. Transition. Between them lay a sleepy village that neither man had ever seen before. Fuentes De Oñoro, soon to be written in blood into the history of the Peninsular War. Fuentes De Oñoro sat nestled in a fold of the land, a small river, the Dos Casas running quietly behind it. The village was little more than a cluster of stone houses, gardens, and narrow streets surrounding a church square. To its west rose a ridge, the ground Wellington chose for his main line. From there, his cannon could cover both the village and the open plains to the south. It was, on paper, a strong defensive position, but not perfect. His right flank was dangerously stretched. thinly held across open country, with no natural obstacles. If the French found a way around it, his entire army could be rolled up from the side. Wellington knew this, but he also knew Masséna would attack, and he trusted his army's discipline to withstand the storm. Masséna, for his part, surveyed the field from a rise east of the village. He saw the tight, defensible houses of Fuentes and the tempting weakness of the British right. He devised a plan: strike hard at the village to fix Wellington's left, then sweep wide around the southern flank with his cavalry and infantry to deliver the killing blow. The trap was set. Transition. On the morning of the 3rd of May, the first French drums began to beat. Mist hung over the fields as French skirmishers advanced, muskets glinting in the weak sunlight. From the orchards and gardens ahead, British riflemen opened fire, sharp, deliberate shots that dropped men in the first ranks. The battle began in earnest. Columns of French infantry surged forward, bayonets fixed, drums pounding. They struck the outskirts of Fuentes De Oñoro like a wave. The defenders, the 71st Highlanders, the 79th Cameron Highlanders, and Portuguese cacadores, met them at musket range. The air filled with smoke, flame, and the metallic roar of volley fire. In the alleys, men fought hand to hand. A British corporal swung his musket like a club. A French grenadier drove his bayonet through a doorframe to reach the man behind it. Every house became a fortress, every courtyard a grave. By midday, the village was half in French hands, half in British. The church was burning. Roofs collapsed, walls splintered, and the dead lay where they fell. From his ridge, Wellington watched through his telescope. He refused to send more troops into the inferno. Let the French waste themselves on stone and courage. He would not break his line for the sake of a few houses. As night fell, the gunfire dwindled to sporadic shots. Lanterns flickered over the ruins where men searched for comrades. In the darkness, groans and prayers mingled with the crackle of burning timber. Day one ended without victory for either side, only exhaustion and dread. Transition. The morning of May 4th would bring uneasy stillness, a pause before the storm that was yet to come. The second day dawned strangely quiet. Both armies licked their wounds. The fields were strewn with broken muskets, shattered drums, and the bodies of men who only yesterday had marched proudly under their flags. Wellington spent the day reinforcing his line, repairing fences for cover and shifting artillery. He expected Masséna to attack again at dawn, but the French remained still. In their camp, Masséna and his marshals argued. To attack the village again was folly. Its defenders had proven unbreakable. Marshal Bessières, commanding the cavalry, urged a flank attack. Others warned that the men were exhausted. Masséna listened, pacing, silent for a long time. At last he spoke. "We will strike them where they are weakest. We will crush their right and drive them into the river." It was a bold plan and a desperate one. But desperation often drives men to greatness or ruin. Transition. As the sun rose on the 5th of May, thunder rolled across the plains, not from the sky, but from French guns opening fire. The French assault began with fury. Artillery boomed across the valley, shells bursting over the British lines. Then came the columns, tens of thousands of infantry moving like a dark tide over the hills, and behind them, a glittering sea of cavalry. Their target was clear: Wellington's right flank, the 7th Division, made up largely of Portuguese troops and young British soldiers, bore the brunt. French dragoons smashed into them with unstoppable force. Infantry squares formed hurriedly, firing as the horsemen circled. The ground shook with hoofbeats. "Hold steady," shouted the British officers. Musket volleys tore through the cavalry, but they came again and again. For a moment, the line seemed ready to break. Then, from the distance, came new orders. Craufurd and his light division were moving to support. Veterans of countless campaigns, they advanced calmly into the maelstrom, covering the retreat of the 7th Division with disciplined volleys. Every shot, every step, was measured and controlled. Their retreat was a masterpiece of precision under fire. As they fell back, British artillery roared from the ridge. Cannonballs ploughed into the advancing French, tearing gaps through their ranks. The French cavalry closed in for the kill, but then through the smoke came the thunder of hooves, British heavy cavalry under Cotton. They charged headlong into the enemy horsemen, sabers flashing, men shouting in a storm of steel. The clash was brutal. For minutes, the two forces swirled together in chaos, horses screaming, blades striking armor, men crushed beneath the weight of battle. Then, slowly, the French attack began to lose momentum. Their formations broke apart. The British line, bloodied but unbroken, pulled back to firmer ground. Wellington watched calmly, issuing crisp orders. "Hold your ground, form line. We'll take them as they come." Transition. By midday, the crisis had passed, but the day's greatest gamble was yet to come. Wellington knew his line was stretched and vulnerable. If the French renewed their assault, they might still break through. He decided on a daring maneuver, to withdraw his right wing slightly, drawing the French in and forming a shorter, stronger defensive arc. Every brigade moved like clockwork. Under fire, soldiers pivoted across open ground, reforming their ranks with perfect precision. It was one of the most complex field movements of the campaign, executed under the enemy's nose. The French tried to follow, but their coordination faltered. Masséna's subordinates quarreled. Orders went astray. Marshal Bessières refused to commit his reserve cavalry, leaving the attack unsupported. The chance for victory slipped away. Wellington's guns opened once more. Round shot tore through the French ranks. The British infantry fired volley after volley until their barrels smoked hot in their hands. The French pressed forward, faltered, and fell back. The rhythm of the fight slowed, replaced by the weary silence that follows failure. As evening descended, Masséna realized the truth. His army was spent. He could not win. From his command post, Wellington looked across the field of smoke and ruin. He had held, barely but decisively. Transition. The sun set over Fuentes De Oñoro for the last time in battle, casting long shadows over the dead. When dawn came again, the French would be gone. The morning of May 6th was quiet. The guns were silent. The field still. Where the French had camped, only ashes and footprints remained. Masséna's army had withdrawn during the night, leaving behind their dead and wounded. For the British, exhaustion replaced triumph. They had lost nearly 1,500 men. The French, nearly twice that number. The village was a ruin, its wells fouled, its church shattered, its streets littered with muskets and torn uniforms. Within days, the fortress of Almeida fell. Its garrison tried to slip away under cover of darkness, but was intercepted and captured. The French invasion of Portugal was finally broken. In Paris, news of Masséna's failure enraged Napoleon. The emperor stripped him of command. The darling child of victory faded into obscurity, undone not by numbers, but by the unyielding discipline of his enemy. For Wellington, Fuentes de Oñoro was no dazzling triumph. He had not crushed the French, but he had proved that his army could stand against Napoleon's best and hold its ground. It was a victory of nerve, patience, and control. Around the campfires that night, British soldiers spoke not of glory but of endurance, of comrades who had stood shoulder to shoulder in burning streets, of the endless roar of muskets, of the strange calm that followed when the battle was done. Transition. From this victory would grow greater ones: Albuera, Salamanca, Vitoria, and the long road that would lead to the fall of Napoleon himself. When the smoke finally cleared, Fuentes de Oñoro was little more than rubble. The river Dos Casas ran red where the wounded had crawled to drink. Yet amid the ruin, life returned. Children crept from cellars. Villages began to rebuild. For the soldiers who survived, the memory of that place would never fade. The crack of muskets in the narrow streets, the cries of comrades, the courage that held the line. It was here, on the edge of Portugal, that Wellington proved a truth that would carry him through every campaign to come. Victory is not always won by the boldest attack, but by the calm that refuses to yield. The Peninsular War would rage on for years yet, but after Fuentes de Oñoro the tide had turned. Napoleon's armies were no longer invincible, and the British army, once dismissed as a minor force on the continent, had earned its place among Europe's great powers. The guns fell silent. The hills of Spain echoed only with the wind, and for the first time in years, Wellington allowed himself a rare thought. That final victory, however distant, was now within reach.